It's a historically hideous season.
It's our 100th ugly house.
And if these walls could talk...
Do you cry a lot?
I do.
Ugliest House in America season premiere, Wednesday at 8 on HGTV.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this whole episode, I often get asked, right, what got me into true crime? I've been telling these stories since, 2019, on videos and, on podcasts. So, sometimes people ask me, hey, what got you into true crime? Well, here's a little story for you, folks. When I was a teen, my mama, she got me a copy of In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. And ever since I read that when I was 15 or 16, I been sort of obsessed with the genre. If you haven't read it, you got it, right? It's like one of the very first true crime books. Obviously, Capote, a very famous writer, In Cold Blood was released in 1965, and it's probably his most famous work. It's one of the original famous true crime books. That's one of Capote's most famous novels, along with Breakfast at Tiffany's, which, shockingly, I haven't read. And In Cold Blood was the true crime account of the Clutter Family murders. And In Cold Blood is very fitting because they were absolutely horrendous. The real story of what happened to the Clutter Family, it's pretty grim. And if you looked at the title of this whole episode, here's my take, pal. And it all begins in good old Kansas. Holcomb, Kansas is a postcard-perfect little village nestled between the Arkansas River and Highway Route 50. 7 miles east of Holcomb lies the county seat, Garden City, and around them, pasture, wheat, crops, orchards, farmyards, ranches, as far as the eye can see. It's about as Americana as you can get. Now, Kansas is called the Wheat State, and no one visiting there will ever have to question why. The inexplicably large tracts of grain fields making waves in the wind, they seem to stretch on forever and ever. The sky, it's big. Any visitors would also find the small place of Holcomb charmingly populated by people in cowboy hats and boots, just under 300 of them at the time in the late 1950s. Every stranger would be recognized as such, as in these parts, the locals, they all knew each other. Everybody would be greeted warmly nonetheless, though. People trusted each other. There was no reason not to. They were all good, hard-working, God-fearing citizens, despite many being second or third generation immigrants from Japan, Ireland, Germany, Scandinavia, Mexico. In this small area, you got a little bit of everything. No one in the town of Holcomb locked their doors. Yeah, but you probably know what comes next. And it was what happened to the Clutter family. And it all happened in November 1959. Herbert Clutter's ancestors came to the USA from Germany as the Clutters in the 1880s. Still retaining the German work ethic in his genes, he had built himself a prosperous farm called the River Valley Farm, where he had utilized his degree in agriculture. He was also the chair of the Kansas Conference of Farm Organizations, and respected among his peers, his family, as well as the villagers of Holcomb and Garden City. He had followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a farmer, and now, with 800 acres of land owned and 3,000 rented, you could probably safely say, I think at this point, he made it. In addition to growing wheat and sorghum, which is also a type of grain, he had a herd of sheep and beef cattle, as well as horses, milk cows for household needs. He had a little bit of everything. But Booty, his pride was his orchard, with pear, peach, cherry, and apple trees, which had seen, by the way, his orchard had seen its own fair share of drama, if you can believe that, folks. A plane had once crashed into those peach trees. The pilot had survived, only to be sued for the destruction of the fruit trees. That's how much Herb loved them. At 48 years of age, Herbert was still a picture of health. 5 foot 11 inches and 154 pounds. He wasn't the, stockiest of builds, but decades of farm life had kept him strong and agile. Abstaining from all stimulants, even tea and coffee, that had certainly assisted him in keeping in good health. Herb, he didn't drink, didn't smoke, and expected his family, as well as his farm staff, to follow those same rules. He had up to 18 very sober people working on his farm at the height of the season, and was known to fire employees he found indulging in a few ale sups. Aside from expecting his employees to be on a continuous dry January, he was, at the same time though, he was a very fair boss. He paid a good wage, and he often gave out frequent bonuses. His strong opinions on substances, it all stemmed from his devout faith in the First Methodist Church. He was a member of the congregation in Garden City, and most of his friends, his social circle, were equally as straight-laced as he was. In 1934, Herbert had married Bonnie Fox. The Clutters and the Foxes, they lived about 20-ish miles apart, and Bonnie had noticed the handsome, pious fella. The pair began dating when Herb was a classmate of Bonnie's brother while in college. After marrying, the couple settled in Garden City, where he worked as a Finney County agricultural agent. Then, in 1939, he established his own farm. By 1948, he had built a 9-room, 2-story white brick home for Bonnie and their growing Clutter family. Bonnie and Herbert, they had 4 children together, 3 daughters and a son. Their firstborn, born after 2 years of marriage, Ivana, was now married, and she had a 10-month-old child of her own living in Illinois. Herbert and Bonnie's second child had arrived 3 years after Ivana. Her name was Beverly, and she was studying in Kansas City to be a nurse. She was, in fact, come late 1959, about to be wed in just a few weeks. Invitations were already printed, and the Christmas time ceremony was an exciting prospect for the whole extended family to look forward to. Nancy arrived another 3 years after Beverly, and at 16 was already a capable young woman, taking care of most of the cooking in the Clutter home. In addition, she was an A student. She had a multitude of hobbies and an active social life. She was very well liked, and she was popular. Nancy planned to go to Kansas State University to study art after high school, and she'd spent the autumn sewing bridesmaids' dresses for her older sister Beverly's upcoming wedding. Nancy was sweethearts with a fellow student named Bobby Rupp, who her father, Herbert, he sorta liked Bobby, but he had made it clear that he would not approve of as a, buddy, you ain't not marrying my daughter. The main reason why Herbert liked but didn't approve of Bobby was that Bobby was, unfortunately for him, he was Catholic, and Nancy, no way, Jose, Nancy would be marrying a Methodist, no question. It would appear that Nancy, she did as her dad wanted, she was loyal to her faith, and she was accepting of the fact that she and Bobby's paths, they would eventually part, probably when they finished high school. She would then go on and have to start finding an actual potential suitor within her religion. But it seemed she also truly loved Bobby and enjoyed his company, and Bobby was absolutely mad about Nancy. And finally, the youngest and only son in the Clutter family was Kenyon, and he was already taller than his father at 15 years of age, and he was a picture of him. The embodiment of everything Herbert, the farmer, would want in an heir to inherit the family farm. Young Kenyon, he wore glasses and was more on the lanky side, and he had strength. He had learned to drive cars at 11 years old, he was in the school band, and he played French horn. Now Mama, Bonnie Clutter, was known to have bouts of depression, which at the time, back in 1959, was widely talked about in terms and phrases such as having, quote, nerves or afflictions. She would take to the bed. These cycles of low mood would manifest after each birth, and today this would be treated as postpartum depression. But at the time, the condition wasn't met with as much understanding, and Bonnie became tagged with the stigma of mental illness and as a bad mother. Despite her illness, she was able to lead a thriving social life and partake in her interests, such as church activities and the garden club. And it's likely small-town gossip turned Bonnie's affliction into something more dramatic than it actually was. But postpartum depression, it's also very, very common, nothing to be ashamed of. Some sources, by the way, like the one I named at the top, they do go into great lengths to detail and dramatize Bonnie's depression and describe it as incapacitating, which the Clutter family, the surviving members, they would go on to say she wasn't as bad as a certain book made it out to be. So on the Clutter family farm, aside from a live-in employee who lived with his young family about 350 feet away from the main house, the closest neighbor was about a half mile down the road. The highway was then a mile on from that, so arriving at the farmstead was not commonly done by accident. It was not on the way to anywhere else. And so, finally, to complete the lengthy list of inhabitants on the farm, Nancy had cats she cherished. And there was also Teddy, the stray collie mix dog taken in by Kenyon some years before. He was an adored member of the family. Teddy the dog, having joined the family from an unknown background, he came with a fear of firearms. Whatever caused it, it may have made him a less effective guard dog. which didn't really matter though, as he wasn't a guard dog, he was a companion dog, but maybe that did end up saving the dog's life. On Friday, November 13th, 1959, Nancy had starred in a school production of Tom Sawyer, and the whole family had attended the premiere. After, Nancy had special permission to go to Garden City to watch a horror movie with Bobby. They had originally planned to go on Saturday, but Herb suggested Friday after the youngsters' play, since they're already out and about. Nancy returned home around 2 a.m. The following morning, Saturday, Nancy had a full day while Herbert was involving himself with farm duties. Nancy spent the morning teaching a local fellow farmer's daughter, Jolene Katz, how to bake a cherry pie. The results of that lesson, I'd imagine, being eaten as dessert for the lunch Bonnie had prepared for the family. Later that Saturday, Herb and Kenyon went for a meeting in Garden City, while Nancy stayed home to tend to tasks and give a music lesson to another neighbor's child. In the evening, Bobby arrived to visit Nancy in his 1955 Ford at around 7 p.m. and the family, they watched some TV. He left the Clutter farm at around 10:30 p.m. and made plans with Nancy to go and see a movie on the following Sunday night. The moon was bright, and Bobby had no trouble seeing his way out of the house, driving along the driveway lined with Chinese elm, and he saw nobody lingering in the area that Saturday night. After Bobby's departure, Nancy was the last to stay up. Bonnie had retired to read on the second floor bedroom that had once been her daughter Ivana's, so Herb could sleep undisturbed in the master bedroom, which was on the first floor. Kenyon and Nancy, they were in their own bedrooms also on the second floor. Nancy enveloped herself in her beauty routine, washing her hair and applying cream, journaled about the events of the day, and set out her church outfit for the next morning before going to sleep. The dress she had laid out, one she had made herself, that would be the dress she would be buried in. Now, rather confusingly, we're going to meet another Nancy Ewelt, friend of the Clutter family. The following morning, Sunday, November 15th, 1959, just as every Sunday morning, Nancy Ewelt arrived at the Clutter residence to be taken to church. See, this Nancy, her parents didn't attend, so it was a regular arrangement. Her father driving her to the Clutters, who would then take her with them to the service in Garden City. But to this Nancy's confusion, she was knocking on the door and was receiving no response when she was ringing. She was looking around, it was all quiet. She couldn't make heads or tails. They hadn't arranged to not pick her up. This was, as you can imagine, the Clutters, very religious, strict, always went to church. So Nancy couldn't understand why they weren't here. But nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for the Clutters just not being here. Two of the Clutters' farmhands, they had been at the house just a couple of hours earlier, performing their morning duties, but they had already left without noticing anything out of place either. Now, Nancy Ewelt and her father, they then drove to the town of Holcomb, where another girl, Susan Kidwell, she was also waiting to carpool to the church with the Clutters. Susan, she had also called the Clutter residence, but received no answer on the telephone. The dread was beginning to twist in everyone's stomachs, and the choice was made to go and investigate the house a bit further. Susan and Nancy, they entered the eerily silent house through an unlocked kitchen door and made a grim discovery, one that would haunt them for forever. They sprinted, screaming, out of the house, and Mr. Ewelt phoned the police. Sheriff Earl Robinson arrived from Garden City at around 9:35 a.m. and was escorted to the house by the Ewelts. Mr. Ewelt told the sheriff about the situation, and Sheriff Robinson immediately called for backup. Soon, the scene was swarming with personnel: coroner, crime scene photographer, ambulance, and Methodist minister. The media started to trickle in as the word spread, and the air was thick with disbelief. Everybody loved the Clutters. Everyone. How could they all be dead? Inside the house, they could see the kitchen phone line was cut. Nancy Clutter's purse had been left on the floor. Going upstairs, they found young Nancy first. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her legs tied together. She was lying on her side, facing the wall. She was still in her bathrobe and slippers, and Nancy had been shot in the back of the head from close range. Next, they went into her brother, Kenyon's bedroom, expecting to find a similarly gruesome scene. But they saw that Kenyon's glasses were left on his bedroom bookshelf, but his room was otherwise empty. In the last room along the hall of the second floor was Bonnie Clutter. She was lying on her back, her hands tied together in front of her, with the rope leading to her ankles, which had also been tied together and then tied to the leg of the bed. Her mouth had been taped, but the tape had partly blown off due to the close-range shotgun blast to the side of the head that had killed her. With her positioning, she would have been able to see the assailant pointing and aiming the shotgun at her head before pulling the trigger. On the ground floor, Herbert's office was undisturbed, with no signs of a struggle and no sign of Herb or Kenyon either. That was till they got to the basement of the Clutter home. Kenyon was in the basement playroom, tied to the leg of the couch, the rope going from his hands to his ankles to the leg, just like Bonnie, except his hands were tied behind his back, and he was on his side facing towards the room. His mouth was taped, and his head propped up on 2 pillows. He had been shot in the face at point-blank range. Last to be found was Herbert, who was in the boiler room on a large, flattened cardboard box that seemed to have been brought into the room just for the purpose of dispatching Herb on top of it. Herb had had his throat viciously cut, and then he'd been shot in the back of the head from close range. He was still in his striped pajamas. His legs were tied, but the arms were loose. They possibly had been tied to a nearby pipe, but he had seemingly managed to break free. But it hadn't been enough. He was dead. They were all dead. While the investigation was underway, the large extended family gathered for the funeral on the following Wednesday. A total of 1,000 people, family, friends, and the people of Holcomb and Garden City came to pay respects and mourn the loss of this most beloved family. It was unfathomable. The locals were fearing it would happen again. If this could happen to the Clutters, who were such a prominent family, it could happen to anyone. Locks and security systems flew off the shelves, and people, once been so open, loving, friendly, suddenly were suspicious of their neighbors. Beverly's wedding, which had been planned for Christmas week, was moved up to only 3 days after the funeral. They figured, since all the Clutter extended family and friends were already in Holcomb for the funerals, they might as well save them a second trip that was only going to happen a few weeks later. The wedding was a welcome break from the nightmare, but also, the worst kind of a wedding you can ever imagine, with 4 empty seats that should have been right beside Beverly. The Clutter lands, crops, animals, and belongings that the family didn't want to keep were auctioned off in March 1960. Everything was sold. Nancy's cats and the dog Teddy were rescued and rehomed. And now a quick word from our sponsor, folks, and they are the delicious HelloFresh. HelloFresh, this new year, 2026. Well, we are officially in 2026. Honestly, folks, the movies kind of lied to us. I was expecting it to be a little better than this. But you know what is better? Home cooking. HelloFresh brings back the joy of the kitchen with recipes that feel good and taste delicious night after night. Start your 2026 eating good, easy, and healthy. Nothing gets people together like a good meal in your tom-tom. Bring people together with meals that are simple and rewarding on busy weeknights. HelloFresh has over 100 mouth-watering recipes each week, from seasonal favorites to global dishes. Folks, listen, let me tell you something, and this is for free. I despise cooking. I get super frustrated. I find it extremely stressful. Some people find it relaxing. Let me tell you, they're wrong. HelloFresh takes the stress out of all of that. They deliver, listen to this, the exact ingredients and recipes to you. You don't even need to think about it. Shopping, ooh, what do I need? Do I need this? Do I need this? Oh, I do need this, but the store only sells it in like a huge package. I only need one bit. Nuh-uh. HelloFresh gives you the exact measurements. Choose from 35 plus high protein weekly recipes, including new Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options, made with wholesome ingredients like sustainably sourced seafood and 100% antibiotic and hormone free chicken. You can get steak, seafood, seasonal products, whatever you're in the mood for. You just pick out what looks good and it'll be on your doorstep, ready for the saucepan, the frying pan, the oven, whatever it is. They sent me some meals. Honestly, folks, I kept paying for it after they did because they were just so good. The meals were so tasty and delicious. Like, I mentioned this in the last time, but they sent us this like chili dish on like a baguette. It was like a chili sandwich type thing, but it was really so good. You might be able to, I don't know if the microphone is picking it up, but my stomach is rumbling. So there you go. Go to hellofresh.com/thatchapter10fm Finally, they updated the URL to get 10 free meals and a free zwilling knife. That's at $499 value. On your third box, offers only valid while supplies last, free meals applied as a discount on your first box, new subscribers only, it varies by plan. So once again, go to hellofresh.com/thatchapter10fm to get 10 free meals plus a free zwilling knife valued at $144.99 on your third box while supplies last. Folks, do yourself a favor, fill up your tummy, go to HelloFresh, use my code, do it all. Thanks. And now another quick word from today's also sponsor. Folks, it's a brand new year. We are officially living in the future. Time to think ahead and make 2026 the year of your bad self. What financial goals do you want to achieve now that the holiday season is over and no more presents need to be bought? A holiday, a car, or maybe it's just a nice little lump sum. Well, I got the perfect help for you. You know, it's easier than ever to overspend, from subscriptions piling up to impulse buys after seeing an ad on your phone to ordering takeout a few times a month. And you're thinking, sure, what's the harm? But if you're not keeping track, it adds up to a hell of a lot. And there's no better time to start keeping track than the start of a brand new year. Rocket Money helps you rein it in by showing you where your money is going and helping you make better decisions so you can keep more money in your pocket. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money shows you all your expenses in one place, including subscriptions you forgot about. See, Rocket Money, it tracks your subscriptions and it has the ability to cancel within the app with just a few taps, saving time and avoiding charges. Their dashboard, it lays out your total financial picture, including bill due dates and paydays, in a way that's easy to digest. It consolidates checking, savings, loans, and investments into a single dashboard to give users a clear view of their financial picture. You can even automatically create custom budgets based on your past spending. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. The app automatically scans your bills to find opportunities to save and then goes to work to get you better deals. They'll even talk to customer service so you don't have to, and who wants to? Rocket Money has saved users over $2.5 billion, including over $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. Their 10 million members save up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/thatchapterpod. That's rocketmoney.com/thatchapterpod. rocketmoney.com/thatchapterpod. Thank you so much to Rocket Money for sponsoring the That Chapter podcast. Now let's get back to it. Now, Sheriff Earl Robinson asked for the assistance of the KBI, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Alvin Dewey was appointed as chief investigator. Bobby, Nancy's boyfriend, was suspect number one from the beginning for obvious reasons. He had been the last person to the house before the quadruple homicide. He'd been going steady with Nancy, but her parents, they objected to the union. Nancy had also returned a promise ring given by Bobby just a couple of weeks earlier, although the couple had gradually gotten closer again since. Bobby, though, he was ruled out after interrogations. He was beside himself about the loss, wondering if he could have done something, if he should have done something different when he left that night. Herbert's recently acquired life insurance of $40,000. That was an adequate motive, but the beneficiaries, the remaining two daughters, Ivana and Beverly, and their husbands, they were quickly ruled out. Some business partners of Herb's were also checked, and the most promising ones alibied out. The obvious leads were all dead ends. Special Agent Dewey had Nancy's diary and boot prints in the victim's blood and a visible pattern pressed and preserved on the cardboard Herb's body had been found on. That cardboard had been brought there specifically to murder Herb on top of it, but now it was their number one clue as to who the killers were. But that was the extent of their evidence, and with no persons of interest left to check, it wasn't a whole lot. The rope and adhesive tape were of average type, could have been acquired anywhere, and the autopsy had concluded that neither of the women had been sexually assaulted. But it was when a certain guy named Floyd Wells decided to come true with his story that the case finally kicked into gear. Floyd Wells had been locked up in prison with a duo of petty criminals, Perry Smith and Richard Dick Hickok. Floyd knew Perry and Dick as a duo, but Perry had already been released by the time Floyd got to know Dick. Floyd Wells had told a delicious story of treasure hidden in an ordinary farmhouse, a farmer he had worked for in 1948-1959, 10 years previously. Wells was under the impression that this farmer had a hidden safe with $10,000 saved inside of it, a stash he used to pay contractors in cash. And Floyd happened to tell this story to Dick, which elicited a strong reaction. He was soon boasting how he was going to steal the money and kill all the occupants of that farm. And remember, Floyd, he had worked for some farmer 10 years previously that happened to maybe have 10 grand in a safe on the farm. This had happened so many years ago, but Dick, upon hearing this story, ding ding ding, he had his sights set on it. And it would be the perfect crime. No witnesses left alive. Now, Floyd Wells, he told the story and then he heard Dick boasting about how he was going to action on that story. Well, he took this as the usual type of tough talk you hear in prison. Didn't, take it seriously. Until that day, he heard about the Clutter's horrific demise on the radio. Floyd Wells knew he was inadvertently responsible and struggled to come forward, fearing he would be indicted as an accomplice. He was the one who told the possible killers about the farm, about the safe. His conscience finally took over. That or the reward money also looked pretty good. And so Floyd told his story to Special Agent Dewey about 10 days after the murder. Wells' employment could be verified from Herb Clutter's meticulous records, which gave his story some corroboration. And that was it. That was the missing piece they needed. Their suspects seemed awfully good for it, but first they needed to be located. Following the trail of Perry and Dick, they came across a history of bad checks, and so they were able to obtain an arrest warrant, simply based on those bad checks. This gave the authorities reason to question the family and search the Hickok family farm, without alerting Dick's parents to the real reason they were being investigated. They just thought it was something to do with some bad checks. Now, Dick Hickok, Perry Smith were not there, and Dick's parents gave the agents a story about Dick and Perry. They were visiting Perry's family, his sister in Fort Scott, on November 14th, which was the weekend of the murders, but they hadn't seen him since. Dick had briefly returned late on the Sunday afternoon and fell asleep during the basketball game the family sat down to watch together, which was unusual as Dick was an avid basketball fan. Must have been absolutely exhausted for some reason. But then Perry and Dick disappeared. So, searching the farm, it yielded a jackpot. A bloody shirt, a hunting knife, and a shotgun in Hickok's closet. The noose was tightening. When questioned, Dick Hickok's ex-wives talked about his violent nature and quick temper. Perry Smith's siblings, they said they wanted nothing to do with him, telling the investigators he was just like his father. He was a selfish, abusive man. His sister also denied that Perry and Dick had been to visit her. She didn't even live in Fort Scott, dissolving the pair's flimsy alibi about where they were the weekend of the family murders. Now, Perry Smith had only been paroled 4 months prior to the murders, and the condition was that he would stay out of Kansas. Perry was a short fella. He was a weightlifting type of guy, with injuries sustained in a vehicle crash still affecting his stature and gait. So he had rolled a car into a ditch and needed extensive surgery on his legs, which had been broken in multiple places. Perry was the 31-year-old son of an Indigenous mother and an Irish father, who had been abusive towards him and his siblings. Perry had been placed in an orphanage after the death of his alcoholic mother, and was a chronic bedwetter and addicted to painkillers, resulting from his, injured lower limbs. He had met Dick in a Kansas State Penitentiary when they had been cellmates. Richard Dick Hickok was practical and pragmatic, opposite of the artistic and musical Perry. Dick had been married and divorced twice, and had a total of 3 kids. His condition for parole was to live with his parents and little brother in Olathe. Dick's parents had provided for him, but were described by him as strict and lacking in love and affection. Dick, he had also been in a car crash, which left his face slightly disfigured, and his personality kind of changed. He struggled to get his shit together after the accident, and his mounting debt landed him in the path of a career criminal, eventually ending up in Kansas State Penitentiary. He'd worked at Bob Sands Body Shop in Olathe, Kansas as a mechanic, and put these skills and the shop and supplies to use on the morning of Saturday, November 14th, when Perry and Dick prepared his car for a long drive. They knew what they were doing. They had heard all about this safe with $10,000 from Floyd Wells. In the afternoon, they set out for that farm with a shotgun in their trunk. Now, along the way there, they brought rope, adhesive tape, gloves, and a full meal. You need a full belly for, the exertions that were about to come. Dick and Perry arrived at the Clutter house just after midnight, with the car lights dimmed, and the pair just entered the house through an unlocked office door. Searching through the office to find the mythical safe, they made enough noise to alert Herbert Clutter, quickly subduing him with the shotgun when he came to check out the source of the ruckus. They kept asking for the location of the safe, but Herb, he had no idea what they were talking about. Now, Perry was sort of inclined to believe him, but Dick continued to insist, "Where is the safe?" They cut the phone lines, then went upstairs and woke up Bonnie Clutter. Bonnie was calm. She gave the men her purse, which had just a handful of dollars in it. She was trying to calm her husband down as the men rifled through her things. Bonnie reiterated they did not have a safe. Then the men went into young Kenyon's room. Kenyon was wearing only a t-shirt and underwear when the attackers dragged him from his bed, so they told him to put something on. A pair of jeans happened to be nearby. They then found young Nancy already awake in her room, hearing everything that was going on, asking what the intruders wanted. Dick and Perry put all the Clutters into the bathroom while they continued to search for the safe. The safe, they were being told, didn't exist. At that point, the Clutters were separated. They took Bonnie into her bedroom and Perry tied her to the bed, and then he did the same to Nancy. They took Kenyon into the basement playroom, tying him to the couch down there. Herb was taken to the boiler room. He was also tied up to a pipe there. He told the intruders if he had money in the house, he would willingly give it to them, but he didn't have any money. Perry wouldn't listen. He drove a hunting knife he had brought with him into Herbert Clutter's throat. Dick could hear a gurgling noise before he realized what had just happened. Perry then handed the knife to Dick and asked him to finish it, but Dick wasn't able to rise to the gruesome occasion. Frustrated, Perry asked him to shine the flashlight on Herbert's face, and as he did, Perry shot Herbert Clutter in the face with the shotgun. In the bright beam of light, they could see the destruction they'd caused in vivid detail. Perry then went to Kenyon and shot him in the head too, then proceeded upstairs to do the same to Nancy, and finally to Bonnie Clutter. The whole family wiped out in minutes in a horrific scene of mindless violence. Now, it's possible Herb Clutter had money secured in a rented safe at the time of the building of the house, back when Floyd Wells worked there, which was 10 years previous in the late 40s. It may have been there temporarily for the purposes of simply paying contractors working on the build, but then returning the safe as keeping huge amounts of cash on the property once the house was done, it was no longer necessary. They did not own, nor never owned, a safe. The whole ordeal from start to finish, it lasted less than an hour. The pair had made it out with about $50, a radio, and a binoculars. Fucking yippee! Leaving the scene, they drove north from Garden City and buried the gloves, shotgun shells they had picked up, and what remained of the rope and adhesive tape. They then headed eastward out of Kansas, discussing their plan to run to Mexico with their whopping score of $50. After a week of acting normal, they bought supplies with bad checks in Kansas City and drove down to the border, arriving in Mexico City November 23rd. The binoculars and radio, they were pawned off in Mexico. They also had to sell their car to acquire some cash. But with some poor spending choices, they were soon out of money and decided to hitchhike back to the USA via California. From there, they hitchhiked east, while trying to brainstorm another score that could buy them now tickets to Brazil. In Iowa, they stole a car and then stopped in Florida to spend Christmas, and also spend some bad checks. From there, they went to Nevada, resorting to odd jobs and even picking up empty cans to earn some money. But Hickok and Smith's run came to an end December 30th, 1959 in Las Vegas. That's when they were ultimately apprehended. A key piece of evidence, well, honestly, and a crazy piece of timing, was Perry Smith's boots. Remember the boot print on the cardboard that Herb had been murdered on? Very distinctive. The police knew the shoe of their killer. Perry and Dick, they were taken into custody at a post office, where they had been picking up boxes they had mailed to themselves from California earlier to lighten the load while they were hitchhiking. It was in those boxes that those distinctive boots were found. Harold Nye and Roy Church of the Kansas Bureau of Investigations started the interrogations on January 2nd, 1960. Questioning started on different matters entirely, the bad checks and parole violations, leading them towards the murder little by little, building pressure, making Dick and Perry sweat. Perry held out and refused to talk, but Dick finally caved in and gave the investigators the whole gruesome story, with all its gory details. Perry killed them all, he claimed. He told agents Nye and Church how they had planned this robbery because they had heard from Floyd there's a safe with $10,000 in it, a lot of money, in 1959. The disposal of the witnesses was part of the plan from the start. He described how they killed them all one by one. Perry, meanwhile, in the other interrogation room, wasn't exactly happy to hear the news that Dick had given the authorities the whole story. Perry was claiming that Dick had shot the women, but later recanted and took the blame for all the killings. Talking to an old military friend about the murders before it came to trial, Perry would admit he did not feel anything. He did not feel a thing for the Clutters as he looked into their faces right before ending their lives. Now you know why Capote called it in cold blood. Dick also said in one of the interrogations, "I've always behaved like 100% normal," to describe his sexual tendencies. But that would prove to be another falsehood as he later admitted to wanting to rape Nancy, obsessing over the prospect during the hundreds of miles journey to the house. It was his main goal. More so than the money they were going to rob, more so than the $10,000, he wanted to sexually assault a 16-year-old girl. But when at the house, Perry wouldn't let Dick anywhere near Nancy. So it's like, Jesus, as horrible as this crime was, at least there was one silver lining. Hey, they're quadruple murderers, but at least they're not rapists. The trial started March 22nd, 1960. Neither of the accused testified at the court, but with the evidence overwhelming and a full confession, it took the jury 45 minutes to come to an agreement on Dick and Perry's guilt. They were both executed on April 14th, 1965, hanged till death. Their graves were exhumed in 2012 to acquire DNA in the investigation of a separate cold case that had been committed along the pair's escape route and within the time frame of their run. Now, the DNA yielded no results due to being too degraded, but they remain as prime suspects in the murders of Cliff and Christine Walker and their toddlers Jimmy and Debbie, who were viciously gunned down in their home in Florida, December 19th, 1959. See, after they killed the Clutter family, the two boys, they went to Mexico, then California, then east, deciding to spend Christmas in Florida. They were seen in Florida in December 1959, in both Tallahassee and Miami. This is over a month after the Clutter family were killed. Now, the Walker family, Cliff, Christine, Jimmy, and Debbie, they lived in Osprey, western Florida, just south of Tampa Bay. It's believed that on December 19th, 1959, the Walker family, they had been out of the house. 24-year-old Christine, she arrived home first at 4 p.m., where she was sexually assaulted and then shot dead. Her husband, 25-year-old Cliff, he arrived shortly afterwards with 3-year-old Jimmy and 1-year-old Debbie. Cliff and Jimmy were shot dead. 1-year-old Debbie was drowned in the bathtub. Despite physical evidence being left at the scene, fingerprints, a bloody boot even, the Walker family murders remain unsolved. Now, some suspect that Perry and Dick were behind it. They were in Miami around the time of the murders, which was only 3 hours drive away. They had checked out of their hotel in Miami the same day as the murders. And, you know, check out of hotels usually around midday-ish. So if they had checked out of their hotel in Miami at midday, that gave them enough time to arrive in Osprey by 4 p.m. and attack Christine. And I can tell you folks, it for sure did, because that same day, around that same time, they were known to be buying items at a store just a few miles from the Walker home. And a witness to the Walker family murderers said one of the killers had a scratched up face, much like Dick Hickok had after the car crash. However, as I said, DNA tests got no results, and some people think whoever killed the Walkers, it was likely, a personal crime. But that was the story of Perry and Dick, two absolute pieces of shit. I mean, the fact that they had purposely gone there with the intent of killing the Clutters, I mean, it's horrendous. Shit, fucking Dick wanted to do worse to at least Nancy. It was a horrendous crime. Absolutely horrific. In Cold Blood is like the best title for what happened there. Holcomb today, it's a village of around 2,000 inhabitants, still populated by farmers and ranchers, though fast food drive-ins have made it to town. Now, the surviving Clutter family members, Ivana and Beverly, they sold the house in 1963, and it's changed hands a couple of times. The stream of people driving down that long driveway to catch a glimpse of the house was incessant, especially after the publication of the book. Some owners, they attempted to make the most out of it, and it did turn briefly into a touring destination for $5 and plans for a bed and breakfast, but zoning laws and the Clutter relatives stopped those endeavors. The house, it still stands to this day. And Truman Capote, the author of the book In Cold Blood, which is based on the Clutter murders, he did extensive research on this case. He visited Holcomb with his friend Harper Lee, who's another author you may have heard of. He interviewed the locals and immersed himself in the atmosphere of the Kansas farmland. Truman went to the trials. He even got to interview Perry and Dick. It took him 6 years to finish his book, which he called novel nonfiction. A true story told in novel format with an arcing storyline and storytelling methodology used in regular fictional crime story. It was groundbreaking at the time. Now it's pretty commonplace, but he invented what we sort of think of as modern day true crime storytelling in this book. And not only all that, it was written very, very well. He was a great writer. But also, despite a lot of the groundwork he did, thousands of pages of notes, interviewing people, going there at the trial, he was still a little bit loose with the facts in his book. Some scenes in his book entirely made up and have been discounted by the townsfolk and family members who were supposedly present for them. But not to diminish Capote's achievement. In Cold Blood, it's excellently written, but one does wonder if the book, if he had included only facts, would it have been such a success? True crime's popularity probably says, yeah. And it wasn't the first true crime book ever published. It was just the first that became a sensation, and demand was born from its popularity. Demand has remained, and it's only grown as you are listening to this podcast. I mean, I think In Cold Blood, it's the second best selling true crime book ever, of all time, after Helter Skelter, which is about the Manson murders. But despite its loose definition of nonfiction, In Cold Blood is still probably at least partly responsible for getting most of us here to this exact moment, writing, reading, listening, and fascinated by true crime. So there you go, folks. Thanks, Truman Capote. No thanks to Dick and Perry, and remembering the Clutter family. So there you go, folks. That is the story of the Clutter family murders. And that is the story that sort of got me into true crime in the first place. Maybe it did to some of you too. But thank you so much for listening to this whole episode, folks. It really, really means a lot that you're here. I think this might be one of the first episodes of 2026, which is wow, crazy. It means a lot that you're here. I'm very, very excited for 2026. Thank you so much for tuning in. There will be some changes coming up in 2026. So I have the podcast, these podcast exclusive episodes, and then I have the videos on the main That Chapter channel. I kind of want to bring the videos and the podcast a little bit closer together, try and make them a bit more simpatico and a bit more similar. So, how I title videos, I might take the numbers out of the titles of the podcast episodes, title a bit more similar to videos so that, you can kind of flip between one or the other. There'll be podcast exclusive episodes on Mondays, and then, the video audio episodes on Fridays, and I want to try and make them sound-wise as close as possible, because sometimes I listen to videos that have turned into podcasts and I'm like, woof, the sound quality is awful. Also, going forward, the vast majority of episodes probably will be just Mike solo episodes in the future. Hope that's all right with you. But Keith and Regina will be on when they can be. It's simply just logistics. It's hard to arrange to be able to record with other people, as you can imagine. But until the next solo episode of the podcast, folks, thank you so much for listening, and much love to each and every one of you. And I wish you a happy, blessed 2026. May your wildest dreams come true. I'll see you in the next one. I love ya. Mike out.